Hello, I'm Alex Stone. Today we'll be talking about commas with non-essential clauses and commas after introductory clauses. First, what is a non-essential clause or element in a sentence? Any element in a sentence that adds additional information but is not critical to the sentence meaning is a non-essential element. Let's look at an example of this. Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, played football at NC State. Now, the text in red here is a non-essential element, and it must be separated by commas from the rest of the sentence. The distinguishing characteristic of these non-essential clauses is that they can be removed from the sentence, and the sentence still makes sense. Going back to the example, if we remove the text in red from the sentence, we're left with this. Russell Wilson played football at NC State. This sentence is still complete, and it makes sense. With an essential element, the information can't be removed from the sentence. Following a similar example, we have this. Russell Wilson is the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the text in red is the same text in red that was used in the last example, except in this example, the text in red is an essential clause, and it cannot be removed from the sentence. If you remove it from the sentence, you're just left with this. Russell Wilson is. This is not a complete sentence. It doesn't express a complete thought, and it just flat out doesn't make sense. When writing, if you're trying to figure out what is essential or non-essential, the easiest thing to do is remove the clause in question and see if the sentence still makes sense. If you're left with a complete sentence and still expresses a complete thought and makes sense, then what you're dealing with is a non-essential element. And that element then must be separated by commas from the rest of the sentence. So moving on, what about commas after introductory clauses? An introductory clause is simply a dependent clause that comes before an independent clause. These dependent clauses can often contain a subject and a verb, but they cannot stand alone as a sentence by themselves. A lot of times these dependent clauses are started with some of these markers that are shown in this list, such as although, until, after, or since. Let's look at an example of this introductory clause. Before we go to the game, I need to get something to eat. The text in red is the introductory clause, and it cannot stand by itself as a sentence. The text in white is the independent clause, and it can stand by itself. Between the introductory clause and the independent clause, you need a comma. And if you were to try to take the introductory clause and make it its own sentence, you'd be left with this. Before we go to the game. Huh? Before we go to the game, what? You can't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, before we go to the game? They think you're crazy. It's always important to remember to place the comma between the introductory clause and the rest of the sentence. Let's take a look at another example. In fact, Russell Wilson won the Super Bowl last year. In this example, the text in red is once again the introductory clause, and it is separated from the rest of the sentence with a comma. Now, the easiest thing to do is to get more practice. That's the easiest way to learn. So, take my quiz and let me know how it goes.